Alex, we're back,
We
and
are.
this is so it's warm now. I don't know if it's
Hmm.
warm in New York.
Oh,
Is
it
it warm in
is.
New York?
Yeah, it's in
It's like,
the high 70s today.
and like, in my room, I can't really pan my camera, is still a space heater, because as of I don't know a week and a half ago, I still occasionally would turn on the space heater for maybe an hour just to get the room a little bit warmer, because I'm all the way
Hmm.
down in the basement of my apartment, and now I have every single window in this house opened. All the fans are going. Slightly humid. I'm terrified. I want the winter back.
Yeah, it's the second you lose the cold weather, suddenly you realize how badly you wanted it. Trust me, this is not doing me any favors. I don't like hot weather. It makes me uncomfortable. I can already feel the humidity starting to creep in and make me sweat every time I even stand up. I'm not into this at all, Patrick.
That's what I get 1 month where I don't have a $220 gas bill, and then and now I'm just the AC is gonna be flipped on a week from now.
Oh God,
It's
yeah, and it's worse for me because I have an AC in the bedroom and there's an AC in the living room, and my office is sandwiched between those two, so I have to get both of those going, and then a fan so that a cross breeze can then blow into my office. It's a nightmare. I live in a fucking nightmare.
whoa. Okay. I'm gonna stop talking to you, and I'm gonna start talking to the other guy who's with us
That's
this
probably a good
morning.
idea.
Too intense.
I'm on edge.
We are joined this morning by Andrew Groen. I know he says that's how you pronounce his name. I was much happier with Andrew Groin, which
Yeah,
we came to on Friday when we didn't have
Andrew
anyone to correct
Groan would have
us.
been good.
If it pleases you, man.
Uh, so yeah, you are the author of the upcoming, still kickstarting, A
Yeah,
History of the Great Empires of EVE Online. I got that right, didn't I?
you did. Yeah, absolutely,
Oh,
100%. I actually still
perfect.
mix it up sometimes because I changed the title like 2 weeks before the Kickstarter launched. So I still screw it up probably more than most other people do. But yeah,
What was
thanks
the
so much for
original
having me
title?
on. The original title was A History of the Great. I'm sorry, A Grand History of the Great Powers of EVE Online, which
Okay.
was just
Okay.
something that came to me in bed one night, and I never thought to change it afterwards because like, oh my God, there's something there, and it's wonderful, and I love it. But then I never thought to like tweak it. And so then the second I got an editor, he was like, no. You need to just, it's almost there. Just change it a little bit.
I
So it's
hate
the closeness that changed it. Gets
Yeah,
me
I
so.
hate naming things. Naming things is the worst. It is
Hmm.
when I come up with a new idea for something to do on the site, the thing that paralyzes me is not doing it and then people disliking it. It's having to come up with a stupid name for it.
Yeah,
I,
that's like
if I could,
the long held secret of journalism is that writing the article is easy, right? Coming up with the headline is actually the entire difficult part of all of journalism.
Because that's the only
yeah,
part anyone's ever going to remember.
And what
yeah,
anybody
I
ever
can go.
comments on.
Yeah, I can go write some story, and then like that part's no problem. Then you spend in 30 minutes just rewriting a headline. Like especially like the struggle with writing a headline is the headline I want to write is probably not as catchy or interesting or SEO friendly.
Right,
But
right.
so it's like, how do you write a headline that gets people into the story without like selling out your soul and having the most boring sort of descriptor of what's the content you've written? And I imagine that must be similar for a title for, you know,
They
I spent an
told
hour on a story. You're going to spend a year on a book.
they told me it was a bad idea to name it this actually because it is terrible for SEO. And I don't
Mm.
have like even the easiest time finding my own like headlines and stuff like that when I try to like figure out where the book has been covered or something like that. I have to searching for that long mess of words is really actually quite difficult. But I love the title so much, and it just says so many wonderful like epic things to me. It just confirms, like when you read that to me, it confirms that all of those suspicions that you had, that like those battles that you hear about in EVE Online are just the tip of the iceberg, and there's this grand drama underneath. Like to me, that title confirms that, and so I decided to just go with that rather than do something that the marketing folks that I was talking to had. Well, not really folks. That makes it sound like I went into a board meeting with marketing people, but a couple people that had marketing backgrounds said it was probably not a great idea. But I think
Can,
people seems to like it.
can I
Yeah,
throw
well,
one alternate title at you just real
I
quick?
would
Just
love
so
that.
just I know you want to work on your SEO. I know you want people to click on it, so I just have this idea. A bunch of people started playing a crazy space game from 2003. You won't believe what they did next.
For 10 years,
For 10 years, you won't believe what they did.
they never stopped doing things.
Yeah, I'm telling you, people click on it.
Yeah. Okay. All right, Alex. So
I'm
at
an
least we know
asshole.
now that if Giant Bomb doesn't work out, you've got a second job in writing clickbait headlines.
Yeah, I'll get a job at Storify or something. I don't know.
We'll get to your Kickstarter and your EVE Online project soon enough. But Alex, what'd you get up to this weekend? Did you just like lay on the floor and cry? You seem like you're in a bad space with this heat.
Wow. Okay, so I look that bad, do I? All right.
You
No,
try
no,
to set
no.
expectations low, and then anything you did is better
Yeah.
than you just laying on the floor and crying.
Yeah. No, I went a step above that at least. I was at least mostly mobile this weekend. I did play a bunch more Mario Kart. I've basically unlocked everything there is to unlock in that game. We will be able to talk about that game on Friday because the embargo is on Thursday.
Oh,
So
cool.
no more teasing for that. I will finally be able to say what the hell I think of Mario Kart then.
Is that out next week?
No, it's out at the end of the month. It's out on the 30th.
Okay, all right, sure. Video game embargoes.
They are probably trying to get people to buy Wii U's for that game. So I imagine them trying to get that review out as ahead as early as they possibly can is their thinking with that.
Yeah, that probably makes sense.
Yeah. So other than that, played some more Hearthstone. I downloaded Super Time Force, but I have not started in on it yet. I did
I
go
played
see.
that.
Yeah, we'll talk about it. I just wanted to throw this at you. I saw a movie this weekend called Under the Skin.
Yeah, it's the one with Scarlett Johansson, right?
Yeah. It's a really weird, creepy sort of horror movie, I guess. I mention it to you because I feel it's the kind of thing you might be super interested in.
It was sort of described to me as the kind of invasions of the body snatchers if it was like an art film.
To a degree, yeah.
Or Species.
Species is definitely the closer analog. It was definitely the art film version of Species.
Okay, because yeah, she plays like an alien that entraps men, something like that, right?
Yeah, and it's all done like there's very little dialogue. It has the pacing of most Kubrick movies, in that everything seems to go on just a little bit longer than is comfortable. But it's I thought it was pretty well made actually. It's if as long as you know it's slow going in and you're kind of willing to go with its extremely sluggish pacing, it's pretty goddamn beautiful to look at. And it's from the guy who made Sexy Beast, which is one of my favorite like random crime movies of all time. And I think this is like it's weird in mostly very good ways.
So you see this in a theater or in the VOD?
I saw it in the theater, which I lucked out because anytime you go to a theater and it's a horror movie of any kind, there are always those assholes that decide to start yelling things whenever there's a quiet moment.
Yeah.
I lucked out that there was really no one in the theater that was looking to yell things during the quiet moments, especially considering most of the movie is quiet moments. But there was one guy who just kept muttering things to himself right behind me. Just like anytime anything would happen on screen, he's like, "Oh yeah, that's pretty good. All right, that's not pretty good. I don't know what that is." Like it just like he just had to judge every scene individually and mutter that out loud so that he could understand that that was his criticism of it.
Well, she gets naked in that movie, so maybe he was just psyched.
It wasn't the nude scenes he was talking through. It was usually most.
All right, well,
most
then I don't have an
mundane
answer.
stuff.
It's
Yeah.
really solemn through the nude scenes.
Yeah. No, that's when his attention is rapt, apparently.
It's okay. I guess it's not out anywhere yet. I just looked to see if I could rent it on iTunes or Amazon or something, but not yet. I'm sure it's
Probably in like a month, I'm guessing.
probably sometime soon. All right. Well, I will keep that in consideration. That sounds. Hopefully that guy doesn't show up to my place.
Yeah, that would be. Yeah,
That would have been real evil. It's like, hey, you should. Here's just like slip him a note. He's like, you should talk to this guy. Like, he's really into movies like this. You can go hang out with this guy and don't come to theaters when I come to them.
He also had an entire backpack full of snacks that he kept walking, like reaching into at various times. So this is a guy who put a lot of thought into his movie going experience.
Yeah, this is a guy who loves the movies, and I think we should let him have that.
Yeah, for
Yeah,
sure.
maybe Alex, maybe you should stop going to the movies and running it for everyone. Have you thought about
sorry.
that?
I'm sorry.
Having an incredible experience.
I did a bad. Patrick, what did you play this weekend?
I played. I played. Drink too much and stay up till 4 in the morning at my lake house on 2 different nights. But when I did get back on Sunday, I managed to finally finish Child of Light, which I don't know if I have really anything to say or add that we haven't already covered when you finished it last week. But it was.
Did you enjoy the end game of that?
Yeah, it actually. So that's okay. I just said we're not going to Child of Light. Now I'm going to talk about Child of Light. But that story is complete nonsense and garbage for 9/10 of. I have no idea what's going on. Like, I mean, I do, but it's not.
It's not well explained.
It's not well told in any measure. And then at the end, while I still don't know really what's happening on a broader level, but there's an emotional connection with your main characters and the enemies you're encountering and the reasons that you're doing the things you are doing for the last maybe fourth of the game. And while I don't think it salvaged what came before, at least there were emotional beats, and I understood what the characters were doing and why they were doing them, and there was actually some really dark stuff happening without spoiling what exactly occurs in the last couple of hours, but like some decent emotional beats that was like, oh, if this game was like half as long and sprinkled this stuff throughout it, I think it probably would have been a whole lot more effective. Not to mention I got to the point where, and this is bad for an RPG, where I was psyched when I managed to finish a battle where I didn't level up.
Yeah.
Because I didn't want to touch any of the skill points. I would have loved it if in the skill tree, because basically, there's like 3 splinters that you're, kind of working towards. It depends on the character, but if I could have just like clicked a target, like if there was a spell, I want to work towards this one.
Yeah.
And just auto upgrade along the way. Just work towards that, and then let me know, hey, skill unlocked. It's little stuff like that I think streamlining both of the story and the mechanics, it would have been so much stronger. I guess what I'm really looking forward to is hopefully it does well enough for them to give it another shot, because I think there's a lot there that would have been a lot better.
Yeah, a lot of great concepts they could very easily build on next time. I would still like to see them try it again. Like I said in the review, that is a game that I think is worth finishing, despite the opening several hours not being terribly great.
Yeah.
Okay, now we've talked about Child of Light. Now we may move on to other games.
Andrew, hopefully you didn't play Child of Light because you're not allowed to talk about it.
No. These days, I pretty much only play Hearthstone and Dota. I spent about 4 months working for Red Bull esports and covering the Dota 2 professional scene, and so
wait, hold on. Let's back up this train a second.
Sure.
What does that mean, Red Bull esports?
So they have an editorial branch, and
how does this work? Okay, all right, we're going.
Right.
You need to explain this.
There's nothing to explain. They cover, it's just Red Bull has a big presence in esports, so they run a couple of events and they really sponsor a few players, that sort of thing. And so they have an editorial website, like redbull.com/esports or something like that. And they hired me and Rob Zachney, who's a really well-known strategy game writer.
He writes for a lot of PC Gamer stuff too.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah. I think he was a columnist in PC Gamer for a long time. So we covered the professional Dota 2 scene because I had sort of a background in StarCraft 2. It's sort of where my passions lie in video gaming. But I got kind of hooked on Dota 2, and it just became, as with so many other people, just sort of like this all-encompassing obsession where you can't play Dota 2 and not learn something for like the first 500 games. Like you play forever, thousands of hours, and you're still learning things. You're still getting better, and it's just like this tremendously addictive, wonderful, engaging, rewarding experience, and I sort of got hooked on that. But during the Kickstarter, I didn't have time to sit down and play for an hour solid blocks anymore, so I really got hooked on Hearthstone. And I know you guys have talked a little bit about Hearthstone. Hearthstone's probably like number 2 behind Child of Light of games you can't talk about anymore because you probably just...
No, it's just when we talk about Hearthstone, we don't know what we're talking about. It's probably more where that's gone. I haven't had a chance to play too much of it in the last couple of weeks just because I haven't had like a crappy TV show to be watching, which is like normally where my Hearthstone play comes in. Is like, well, 24's premiere. Well, I guess maybe because 24's premiere was not very good, but I'll still watch the whole thing. So like that might become where I play Hearthstone the next.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Like
that's the beauty of Hearthstone. Where I actually do the exact same thing, where I sit down with my wife and we watch Star Trek: Deep Space Nine on Netflix, and I play a couple of games of Hearthstone while the episodes go. It's a beautiful little companion to other media.
So I've been doing that through the entirety of the NBA playoffs, so it's working out pretty well for me.
Yeah. So I'm going to ask again about Red Bull Esports.
Okay.
Sure.
Just because I think it's interesting that it's not uncommon for brands to be like a brand like Red Bull, like obviously because it's an energy drink, to be present at something like an esports event. But like in terms like how does them having an editorial branch? Well, I get why they would have it because it allows them to sort of better engage the types of people that they have that they're advertising to. But like in terms of the pitch to you, like how does that work? Like what is Red Bull looking for in terms of like what you should cover?
Well, I mean, they're just looking to be an authority on esports and have people come to Red Bull for knowledge about esports and stuff like that. And so, as far as what exactly their angles were, I'm not really entirely sure. I needed a job after Penny Arcade closed, so that was pretty much my motivation.
Not unreasonable.
And you know what? Like, it was a weird sort of experience. It wasn't like my favorite job I ever did, but like they were good people. They were fine to me, and it was kind of weird because I've never had a non strictly journalism job before, and so it was really strange to go up and like try to get an interview with somebody, and they'll be like, "No, I'm sorry, I can't talk to you. I'm sponsored by Monster Energy drinks." I'm sorry, I can't talk to you because like the esports is still sort of like this fragile business, and they're all very, very scared about losing their sponsors. So they won't even like be perceived as talking to you if you're a competitor of one of their sponsors or something like that.
Wow.
So you can't get an interview with one of their players or something like that.
Man, I've been turned down interviews before, but never in the context of no, I'm sponsored by Mountain Dew. That's amazing. I wish I could put that on my resume.
The energy drink business is very competitive in esports because esports is all like 13 to 30-year-old males, and that's who energy drinks want.
Does Monster have its own editorial team? Like, do you guys have like a West Side Story knife fight?
I don't think they do, but Monster does. They have a couple tournaments. They sponsor Team Evil Geniuses, and I know Coke recently got into. I can't believe I know these things. I can't believe I know who energy drink and soft drink manufacturers are sponsoring in the world now. Because
someone has to. Someone has to.
But I know Coke was a big sponsor of League of Legends, and that kind of spooked Red Bull away from wanting to cover a lot of that kind of thing, or like to get involved too much in League of Legends because Coke kind of had that on lockdown. I don't know how much Red Bull can compete with Coke, but like Monster, NOS, Coke, Pepsi, all those things, just a big, massive drama. And it was really frustrating a lot of times where you'd have a great story, but you just couldn't get it because the person was sponsored by the wrong people.
Oh man.
I think the equivalent of that for us is we work for a site called Giant Bomb. They're like, yeah, we're not letting this executive anywhere near you.
Yeah. One of the unfortunate realities of our naming convention.
Don't say our website name at an airport.
I work for CBS Interactive.
Right, there it is.
That sounds bad. Yeah, well, before we were bought, it wasn't even much better. It's like you could go, well, I work for a whiskey. Like, no, that's not much better. I can't tell if that's better or worse.
At least that's less threatening.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. So yeah, I was playing Super Time Force over the weekend. I played maybe about like 90 minutes. I played through the first world. I got through the first boss before you sort of play through this the first section of the game, and then you're allowed to kind of Mega Man style choose whichever level you want to go to after that. At some point, like the first world kind of acts as, here's how this game is structured, and then here are, I don't know, like 6 or 7 stages that you can tackle in any order, so you can go unlock new characters. It's so the times I've played this at events, and this game has been at events for a number of years, although I in theory understand how Super Time Force works, I never spent enough time to really grasp the nuance of like why I should be placing certain characters in some areas. Like the whole idea of swapping characters across a timeline sounded really nifty, but you really need about a solid hour before it starts to click and you figure out which characters you like to play as, which characters are useful across the timeline. But once you start doing that, it is really interesting how much the game stops being. It sort of is. So it's an action game that at certain points stops being an action game. Specifically during the boss battles. The boss battles where you have about a minute in order to just take out this giant creature. And it really is, I guess, on some level, just about swamping them with bullets. But it's about strategically swamping them with bullets, and then thinking about your actions as being across an entire minute, then rewinding that minute at various points and finding spots to drop in new characters so that they're taking down the enemy across that part of the timeline that you've dropped them in, whether it's a full minute or maybe the last 30 seconds when you've exposed all of the weak points and you're just trying to hammer away at a creature as much as you can. But that's where the really fun strategy comes in, because like the main dude that you have, the first guy you encounter, he has just kind of like bullets that fire straight, and then when you power it up, he can shoot like a stream of 3 bullets in 3 different directions. But that's not very good for precision shots. So then you have a sniper, and so when you have these bosses where like a boss, you basically have like the red sections of them that you're trying to hit. That exposes the weak points. So you drop the sniper in for that full minute, use the sniper to try and take out all those red spots, and then you've got like a grenader and some other options, and you kind of set them up in areas where they're not going to die over the course of that full minute. And then at the end, when you do like that final run for that final minute, it's amazing because you have like 20 guys jumping around as ghosts that you've all orchestrated, and then you're just playing the one last character that kind of gets to watch all of it play out as hopefully you've set up the dominoes to take out the guy in the last couple of seconds. And it's weird. It then becomes a strategy game in a really interesting way.
That sounds really intense and really complicated, but in a way that I really want to, I actually kind of want to stop doing this show right now and go play that, because I've had it downloaded and I didn't get a chance to try it yet, and now I really want to try it.
Well, I mean, that's the thing, like Super Time Force, when you look at it in a trailer, it seems pretty simple. And it is pretty simple when you first start playing it, because it's, okay, you're shooting dudes, those dudes are blowing up, when you die, you can play as another dude. But it's the way they set up the enemy encounters that forces you to be smart about how you do that. And then they also, the game doesn't seem like it's going to be especially long. It took me about half an hour to maybe get through the first like main world, but the game has a ton of encouragement for you to go back and play through areas again. There's lots of secret stuff that you don't find along sort of the critical path. They also have sort of like skill shots that are scattered throughout each stage. So occasionally when you shoot an enemy, they'll spit out like this little glowing object, and if you collect those, that unlocks new stuff back in your main base. I haven't gotten too deep into exactly what you unlock, but for example, like if a guy is on a level above you and you shoot him down below, that little piece is going to shoot in the wrong direction, and you're not going to be able to grab it. It's not physics-based. It only shoots out in a very specific direction. So you have to either rewind or just on the next time through, make sure you position yourself so when you shoot that guy, you collect that little bit, and then you can unlock new stuff as you continue to go through the game or cycle through old levels. But it's a game that, maybe like a lot of Cappy games, it seems extremely simple, can be explained pretty simply, but as you play more of it, you realize there's a lot of interesting depth to what just seems like a modern Contra game.
I know you said Cappy games, but it really sounded like you said Kathy games right there, and now I am thinking about what a video game based on the comic strip Kathy would be like.
What do you think a video game based on the comics for Kathy would be like?
Yeah,
I'm thinking like a sort of side-scroller meets dating simulator.
Okay. So is there any action involved, or like this is all?
Yeah, there's some light platforming. There are some enemies, mostly in the form of calories. Then you have to go on dates, which always go disastrously. And then at the end of every level, she just goes "ack," and that's it.
Right, I'm picturing like instead of a life bar, it's like a disappointment meter where you only have so much disappointment that you can stomach.
Okay, now you're on board. I got you. You're in. You're in. We're gonna make this next Kickstarter. We're making the Kathy game.
I feel like if you had come up with this idea back in the 16-bit era when they were making platformers out of every license they could get their hands on, that you might have actually been able to pull this off. But you know what? Like, damn, this giant bomb thing doesn't work out. If you went to Kickstarter saying I want to make a side-scrolling Kathy game, you might not be able to get the license, but you could say heavily. What's another instead of ack, like
spiritual successor to the Kathy?
Yeah, ick is that's close enough. You could pull that off.
Yeah. All right. I know. I've already checked out of this show. I'm like writing the design doc in my head right now. So maybe we should just talk about Andrew's book. What do you say?
That's fair. Yeah, I'm looking forward to playing more Super Time Force, but only sunk like an hour into it, and I intended to play some Tex Murphy last night because I'm still so psyched that game exists in 2014. Although I'm afraid if I play it that it'll be bad, and if a new Tex Murphy game is bad, I really don't know if I'll be able to process that. So I will play it, but I'm 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 very nervous about booting that up, but I'll do that at some point this week. But yeah, Andrew, so you are still in the middle of this Kickstarter. You have
right in the middle.
What, maybe like 15 days or so left, probably?
Yeah, I think it's 13. But
I was gonna say, you probably know the exact number of hours, minutes, and seconds that you have left on.
They're drifting away from me, and it's actually kind of terrifying to watch the day. It's like, oh God, it's only 12 now. It's like, oh God, no. I need more time. I gotta get this together. Didn't anticipate this. I need more time.
So why don't you give, for people who maybe aren't aware of the Kickstarter itself, like what is the pitch? Like what are you trying to write with this book?
So the book is called, like he's mentioned before, A History of the Great Empires of EVE Online, and it's sort of this, everybody who follows the gaming press reads those stories all the time in the headlines about these crazy battles that happen with like 4,000, 3,000 players, with people just nuking each other with lasers, and there's these huge wars. Like you wrote a story on Giant Bomb that was really good.
Mm-hmm.
That's sort of.
So, side note, so when I went to Max Temkin's birthday party, which is I think. I don't know if that's where I might have met you there. I'm not sure. But anyway, I had been telling Max about the story I was writing about EVE Online, and then he mentioned to me that, oh, Andrew, I mentioned one of the guys I talked to. He was like, oh, Andrew talked to him too. And I was like, oh, shit. He's probably writing that story. Like, no one's written it yet, but I know Andrew has done EVE Online stuff. So I wrote my story faster, thinking that you were writing it for Polygon or something. I didn't want to ask you if you were, because then it might prompt you to write your story faster. So then I got my story up like 3 days ahead of when I was sort of internalizing in my own head. And then when I found out from Trin that you were writing this book, I was like, oh, I am an idiot, but I'm so glad I got that story out.
It's the most wonderful honor for you to have been afraid of my EVE reporting.
Yeah.
I couldn't have asked for a better compliment than that. But
anyway, yeah. So continue. Sorry, that's just.
But yeah, I mean, like that story is an example of the kind of thing that would be in this book, where it's like you hear about these crazy battles, but those are just the tip of the iceberg of what's been happening for literally 10 years, where there's just this insane drama going on behind the scenes of this weird, bizarre virtual world, where it's just unlike anything that's ever happened before in video gaming. It's unlike anything that's ever happened before in the history of humanity, where we have this virtual world where this war simulation has been running for 11 years, and just the craziest shit has been coming out of it. And it's just like somebody needs to write this stuff down, because I feel like, I'm not trying to have like delusions of grandeur, but like my hope is that if someone would read this in 50 years when virtual worlds were kind of a bigger thing, and think about like what it was like in the very first ones, like what were people doing when these things first became a thing in the world. And so it's like, and on the other side of things, it's like EVE Online is this really old school MMO that's like, it's like Ultima in a lot of ways, where the players just have like their own agency, like they can do whatever they want to, and there's such value in figuring out what players do with their own time and what they do when they can do anything. And it's really neat that what they do when they can do anything is fight wars and try to make money. It's really interesting.
Yeah, and I think there's something really important that you touch on there, and you mentioned it, I think, in the bottom of your Kickstarter, where you have to mention like challenges and problems, ways this could go wrong. And one of the ones you mentioned was that the stories that players tell, their own interpretation of history, or the history that they have built in their minds, or the legacy they want to leave, is not necessarily the truth or what occurred. What you read on a wiki page is not necessarily how history went down, and the importance of historians is to try and encapsulate the truth to the best that you can by talking to various players and finding out where they all kind of intersect, and find the closer you can get to the truth of a story that played out, rather than the truth told by the victors.
Right, exactly. And it's like, you kind of sound like you're actually giving them the benefit of the doubt, where it's just like this natural bias of being a human, where you want to tell a story that's more favorable to yourself because that's how you perceive things, like everybody's the hero of their own story kind of thing. But what I'm finding out, and it's a really big concern of mine, and it's something that I work really hard to negate, is that people will deliberately lie to you to enhance their legacy. Like there's people like you talk to the Mittani.
Oh yeah.
He's a kind of person, and he I'll get to that later, but he will deliberately lie to you.
You could do a whole show on that guy.
Right, you absolutely could. He's a fascinating person. Like if there wasn't so much press about him already, I would absolutely write just a profile on him as a person because he's a fascinating person. And he'll deliberately lie to you. And the thing about him is that he's such like a supervillain that he'll tell you that he's lying to you while he's lying to you because he needs you to appreciate how good he is. Like, that's one of the great safeguards of working with him. Like, oh, there's actually other people that I'm a little bit more worried about because maybe they're not going to tell me that they're being deceptive in any way. But yeah, it's a big concern where you're wondering whether people will just want their own great narrative to be told. And you find that over and over again where if you talk to enough people, they're like, well, you know, that story of amazing heroism on the part of Goon Swarm isn't exactly the way things actually happened. And, you know, this alliance was already on their way down before they had their mighty victory, that kind of thing. It's just...
Yeah, I had the last. I've spoken to the Mittani a couple of times over the years, and the first time, or no, the most recent time for the most recent story I wrote, you know, there were several points throughout the interview. He's like, I would ask a question. He's like, do you actually want to know the answer? Then we're gonna have to turn off this recorder. And I was like, oh, okay, all right, I do. But he is the epitome, I think, of a lot of when people think about EVE Online.
Mm-hmm.
You know, he sort of encapsulates a lot of that. The fact that the idea that EVE Online is this giant virtual chessboard that people are trying to think 10 steps ahead. That they run PR campaigns. That they the diabolical. Yeah, I mean he's a cartoon character, right? I mean that's the fun of it.
He's Dr. Claw, basically.
And I've come to understand over the last couple of months that the Mittani is like a huge part of his brilliance isn't necessarily like tactical or even in like his legendary spy master skills. It's actually in public relations, where he's detailed to me before his public relations strategy, where he's like, you know what, I understand what a lot of other people in this game don't understand, which is if you make yourself constantly available to the press, if you make your contact information really available, and you always do interviews, people will continue to contact you instead of other people.
Yeah.
And that gives you the opportunity to tell your story over and over again, whereas these other people, like nobody really knows, in the general press, everyone will go to the Mittani, no one's going to go to the leader of Pandemic Legion. Right. No one knows who used to lead Band of Brothers or something like that. And that's this really interesting thing about him, where he is such a charismatic person who gives these amazing quotes to journalists who want to use his words because they make their stories so much better because he's just a really gifted speaker. And that charisma, his skill is charisma. And it's part of what puts him in the press all the time, and it's also part of what allows him to lead this ridiculous army of like 9,000 players.
Right, but it's it's super dangerous because, and that's one of the the things you learn as you report for longer periods of time is the juicy quote may be the one that you want to put in the story, and it feels really awful when you can't put it in the story because it's like the one missing piece that is gonna really just it's gonna tie the story together.
Right.
But he's one of those guys where you really have to you got to double check, you got to go do your homework because he has become so skilled at giving you exactly what you want, and he's very good at giving you a lot of background information about, hey, do you understand this term? Like, let's break down this term, and he kind of gets you on his side in a certain way. You have to make sure you're talking to someone else so that you can actually try and tell the story the best that you can.
That's one of the most interesting things about EVE Online is that you have to, you can't ignore someone like that, though, because he is such a valuable source, because he's been there and he's been the leader through a lot of these really big events over the last 7 years. So you have to brave the minefield, and you have to go talk to him, and you have to hear what he has to say. But you also have to have safeguards in place for when the inevitability comes that he's going to give you misinformation. I remember he gave a speech at FanFest one time, and he began with him saying the phrase, "Everything I'm about to tell you is true except for the parts that aren't." And that's just him in a nutshell. That's what he takes pride in.
Son of a bitch.
He just loves to gloat in front of the crowd and tell you that he's giving you misinformation.
And when I went to FanFest last year, one of the amazing moments was, I don't think it was him, but it was Goon Swarm, which he's associated with. One of their they're known for being trolls throughout the EVE Online community, and one of the things that they do is I forget what it's like, the little locations they have throughout I forget, as soon as I write an EVE Online story, then like all the terms disappear from my head about like 2 weeks later. But basically, they have these different citadels scattered throughout the EVE Online universe where you can name them whatever you want. They just choose to name them after spoilers for Game of Thrones. So they showed this in a slide at FanFest. They're like, let's just show you, by the way, like what we have throughout the universe, and then click to the next slide, and it's just a whole, this is a year ago, and so it's like all these spoilers for characters that die in Game of Thrones, like several books away from where the show is at, and the whole crowd is just like boo, and I like managed to like turn my head away. I just wasn't looking, and then someone next to me was like, oh, a bunch of Game of Thrones spoilers. And I was like, you son of a bitch.
Such good heel tactics, so good.
Yeah, and it's like that's one of their. I honestly think that the great troll of the Mittani, that his career troll that he's been working on for like the last 6 years, is to make people believe that the goons aren't trolls. Because he's been telling this story for years about how when they first came to EVE, they were these really upstanding citizens, and they just wanted to fit in. They wanted to appeal to the old guard and make them appreciate them and be really good citizens within EVE. But it was everybody else who unleashed their power, who just provoked them, and finally they just gave in and saw this stuff, and they became the monsters that everyone accused them of being. And I really think that he's just been working on this, and this is his career. All of it is leading up to the devil convincing the world that he doesn't exist. That kind of thing.
Alex, what do you make of this EVE Online business?
Well, so I've obviously never played EVE before. The entirety of my exposure to it comes from the stuff that like you, Patrick, have written, and also the stuff that Andrew has written about it. That said, I backed the book because I think the story sounds super fascinating, and the way you're talking about framing it sounds really interesting to me. The question I have is that I even though I don't play EVE, I still understand the basic concepts of like online games and some of the the obscure lingo that they throw in there and that kind of stuff. Is there a concern that in trying to tell these stories to people, that it's going to be difficult to frame it in a way that someone who doesn't really follow MMOs or these types of games or this just type of culture, for a way for them to be able to easily understand and frame it against the kinds of conflicts and similar types of stories they'd be able to grasp from outside of gaming?
Right, absolutely, and I absolutely think there is that capability. I mean, a couple people in the Kickstarter brought up the idea of just making a glossary, which is it's inelegant in a lot of ways, but it is a solution. But I mean, it's something that I feel like I've been training for a long time, which is like when you write for Wired, which I did for about 7 months, for a little while. They really drill into your head the fact that the Wired audience is everybody. Like, Wired reaches so many different demographics, so many different types of people, that they will get like the really hardcore video gamer who knows everything about video gaming, and they will reach people who are just sort of vaguely interested in tech and don't really know anything about modern video games or anything like that. And every story has to appeal to all of them. And they'll bash it into your head, and they'll work with you for months. They'll kill stories. They don't care. They will edit stories. They will send you back 6 different times, story edits and that sort of thing. And I really think that what I learned from that whole experience is that you just have to start from the beginning. You just have to not write this for like the super crazy hardcore players, because those people number in the dozens in EVE Online. The people who really understand this are dozens of people, maybe hundreds. And so really it just comes down to being basic, just being brave enough to be basic, but also try to make everything interesting at the same time. And it comes down to just using language in a certain way that's both interesting, but also just goes back to the beginning and explains everything calmly. Because the great secret, I think, to a lot of this stuff is that even really hardcore EVE players, people who've been playing for 7, 8 years, have no idea about the actual history of what went on in the Outer Rim territories, that sort of thing. The people who actually follow this stuff on the forums are very, very few. And so it's really futile to write a book that appeals specifically to them.
When you're, like, say, obviously, you're going the Kickstarter route, you're going to, it's already been funded, so the book's going that way. But if you were, like, say, pitching this book to a publisher, like, what would be the story, like, the first, the main story that you would say, look, this is one of the key things that I'm going to tell in this book?
Like a story from the EVE universe?
Yeah, just like, like a basic overview of one.
Yeah, so the it's difficult to point out like one specific story because my favorite story in the Eve universe is that of the Great War, and the Great War lasted 3 years.
Yeah,
it's this huge, ridiculous, amazing, epic tale that is consisted of 1,000 different smaller tales. But then, if you really want to get into like the nitty-gritty of this, like the Great War is without a doubt the greatest story that's ever been told within EVE Online, and it builds up to this absurdly interesting climax of betrayal and just backstabbing, and it's beautiful. But if you really wanted to get down to like one little story, there's the story of Istvan Shogatsu and the Guiding Hand Social Club, who was a spy mercenary basically, hired to infiltrate another corporation back in like 2005, and he just sort of went entirely beyond the call of what he was hired to do and just wanted to make a statement to the rest of the world. And so he spent literally 8 months of real-world time infiltrating this corporation, spreading his seed throughout the entire corporation, until ultimately assassinating the corporation's leader and looting literally every asset that they had, billions and billions of ISK. And like the nitty-gritty of stories like that are just like, you can't not be interested in that. It's so fascinating.
That's pretty amazing. That's pretty amazing stuff. The Kickstarter campaign, I thought the video that you did was actually a really great example of how to do a Kickstarter video. It's short, it's to the point, but it nails all the key details. It's something that I think a lot of Kickstarters tend to get wrong in that they tend to get too verbose and a little over-explanatory.
Sure.
How did you go about putting together that Kickstarter?
The video, yeah. Okay, so there's
just the whole thing.
This is a good story because
the Kickstarter video especially, I've gotten a lot of people who really liked the video and like, oh man, that video you did was really good, really perfect, hit all the right notes, it got me really excited about the project. I was like, oh, okay, so the thing about that is I made my own video and it sucked.
Yeah.
And so the day before the project launched, Max Temkin, who was one of the co-founders of Cards Against Humanity, does Kickstarter office hours in Chicago. So if you're running a Kickstarter, he'll bring you into the office, he'll sit down with you for 20 minutes and just sort of say, what are you doing? Here's how we can maximize this project for you. Like, this is what you should be doing. This is what the notes you should hit. Sort of all advice on Kickstarters. And so I had met with him like twice before. He's a really nice guy. He's just been extremely helpful with this. And so I meet with him the day before the project launch just to do like a little spot check of everything. And he's like, no, this video's got to go. Like, it's the wrong aspect ratio. Like, you've got a blue glare on your face for no reason. What the hell is that? And he's like, well, but I like some of this. We'll keep some of this. But so in the middle of the day, middle of the work day, he declares, okay, we're going to do this over again. And I'm like, okay, I want to launch tomorrow, but if we can do this by the end of the day, that's fine. So, he does a couple things at work, picks up a giant bag of camera equipment, and literally whisks me away to a friend of his design studio in Chicago, sets up all kinds of camera equipment, professional audio, does the lighting himself, then reshoots the entire video himself, stays up until midnight editing it for me, and then decides that the cover image, he doesn't like that either, the picture that says a history of the great empires of EVE Online right before the video starts. And so he makes me a couple options for new images as well. He's like, I really want this project to succeed. This is a really great project, and I want this to work. And so it's midnight, and he's sending me this thing on Dropbox, and I'm launching in like 10 hours. Just, I mean, that's my favorite story from the.
It's an unbelievable dedication that man has to Kickstarter. He is the Kickstarter whisperer.
He is, yeah.
We have spent a lot of time painting Max Temkin as an asshole on this website, and
but he's a beautiful asshole. He's a wonderful
all
asshole.
That great work.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's so. I mean, so explain a little bit about the emotional arc of launching a Kickstarter, which all humble people realize that it's probably going to fail and this was a terrible idea, and yet you like wildly overfunded in the first day.
So it's not really so much of an arc as it is just rising terror. It's just all terror. There's no good part about launching the Kickstarter. Like the excitement, by the time you're launching the project, you've already spent so much time with this that you can barely even see why it's a good idea anymore, why you like this anymore. And so, like, I was confident, like, I believed that we could probably, like, wrangle together, like, 40% funding in the first day and then climb over, the next 3 weeks to, like, 60%, and then we could rally at the end, and then we could hit the goal, and it would be good. Like, I believed I could do that, and I was comfortable with that. And so then when it actually went well on the first day, it was just, I don't even know what to say about it. It's a really gratifying experience to know that this thing that you started to believe was kind of stupid over the last 6 months, people agreed with you. Like people finally could see and were agreeing with you that this was a good thing to do and a worthwhile thing to do. And then after that, after it went well, just stress again, just more and more stress, because I came to realize that like I have an opportunity now, and I have this opportunity to turn this into something even cooler than I thought it was going to be. So Max Temkin again, like 3 months ago, told me like, no, don't do a soft cover, do like this big hardcover, do this like obviously a table style book. I'm like, yeah, no, Max, that's ridiculous. Like, I don't have the capabilities to do that. This book isn't going to raise enough money. I'm not going to set like a $50,000 goal or something like that. That's ridiculous. And so now that's what I'm actually trying to do, where I have the funding to do that, to go out and hire a professional designer to print these big, beautiful books in color and do all these wonderful things. So like I have like 6 meetings this week to try and figure out, can I do this? Do I have the funding to be able to make something that I feel like can really impress people, really be something that I'm super, super proud of? And so, yeah, so it's terror and then joy for like 3 minutes and then stress.
There's a lot of people asking if those are EVE Online maps behind you.
They are, yeah. No, this is something that I turn to like all the time. I have like 4 of them here. Just like this one's from 2004, 2007, 2011, 2014, and they just like I look over there and you can just really in an instant see the progression of how empires have expanded and collapsed. And like you can look at this map and immediately it's obvious that Band of Brothers isn't there anymore. And that happened in like the span of like 3 months. You know, it went from like the sprawling empire to nothingness. And I love maps. Like I've always sort of had this love of maps. Like when I was a kid, like I didn't read Lord of the Rings. I just looked at the map and was like studying things and like drawing my own maps on graph paper and stuff like that. So to be able to have something right here, like a visual aid that helps remind me of how fascinating all of this is really wonderful.
Another thing that a lot of people have been asking in our chat is how much EVE Online do you actually play, or how much do you plan to play over the course of sort of researching the project? Because all the stories I've written, you know, I think I played maybe 2 hours of EVE Online before I went to FanFest, just to put like some context in my brain.
Right.
But I never found that I really needed to spend too much time in the game to cover it. But I was also doing, compared to what you're doing, like the surface level reporting about some of the events.
Yeah, I play casually. I'm what they would call a high-sec Care Bear. I don't like get involved in wars. I don't go out and like PvP with pirates and stuff like that. But I tool around. I play EVE much like you would play a normal MMO. Like I go and I run missions and I buy ships and I play around and look at pretty spaceships, that sort of thing. And lately, the biggest thing that I do in EVE, and I realized this was an interesting thing for me, that I realized that what I was doing had become part of the game, because I was inside the game doing a little mini book tour between the main trade hubs, just sort of like chatting with people, doing like AMAs in Jita and Do-Dixie and Hack and that sort of thing. And so like that's sort of my in-game role now has become what I do in EVE. As I report, like I go and I talk to people about the book, or I'll send people mails in game trying to get their attention to do interviews, or I'll do interviews on comms, that sort of thing. And so yeah, well, what I do in EVE Online is write a book, which is pretty much what I do outside of EVE Online.
I mean, that's something that people have also brought up, that is something I've encountered. Just tracking people down can be exceptionally difficult, not only because people tend to be very private in EVE. You know, they do these, you know, participate in these really grandiose battles that get a lot of public attention, but the players, you know, the actors within these battles are not necessarily very public people, or the moment you get on Skype with them, you realize, like, oh no, like you know, they're not necessarily like the most articulate or the Mittani like level, like prepared to explain to you everything about this battle and what happened.
Right.
And purely just tracking people down, I found, is what I spent most of my time doing on the stories that I report. Is just like, okay, who are the handful of people I still know from EVE Online? Can they tell me how to track down this guy? Because I can't register for this message board because I'm not a part of the community, and weird things like that.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's one of the things that's been most valuable about my time sort of working on this on the side for the last 6 months, is that, you just sort of make connections, and that's the only way that you can get in touch with people in EVE, is to make connections and be introduced through somebody else. And so you're just sort of building this tree of contacts throughout everything, and you find the right people, the right hub people who know everybody, and it makes everything a whole lot easier. When someone can vouch for you and say that, you know, he's done some work in EVE Online before, like he didn't screw it up, he's not like this, you know, reporter who's just going to be, you know, writing this really surface level stupid story that's going to make a ton of mistakes. Those sorts of things really help. And CCP actually has been a really generous partner with that sort of thing, where they've put me in touch with their community people who have been willing to put me in touch with players who maybe have left the game. Like people who were really big in the game back in 2002 don't necessarily play anymore. People who were big in the Great Northern War and back in 2005 are probably play alternate characters now. They don't check their other characters because, you know, they got too many mails, that sort of thing. And so they've offered to be sort of like a liaison between those players and be like, they can't give me their email directly, but they can reach out and say, look, this guy's doing a history book. Would you be interested in talking with him? I can make the introduction, that sort of thing. And so really, that's what you just mentioned is a huge difficulty, and it's one of the things that I've had to spend most of my time doing. But it's been worth it, and I feel really comfortable getting in touch with just about anybody these days.
If this book is a success, will you be writing the full history of Dust 514?
I think you could do that probably in about 25 minutes.
Okay, wait, no, hold on. I'll give you the history of Dust 514. No one gives a shit.
That's kind of what I thought.
It's kind of amazing how much no one gives a shit, because like you heard at FanFest, like I don't know if you guys paid attention to too much of that, but they basically just sort of killed Dust 514.
Yeah, they said they're doing like a brand new shooter from the ground up with the same team, and it's going to be PC focused, and that's all the things that people were clamoring for when they announced that this was going to be, you know, this PlayStation exclusive. And it was amazing to be at FanFest last year, and you know, at the end of each day of FanFest, so they do their keynote stuff at the end of the day as opposed to the beginning of the day, and then they have, you know, different sections for different parts of EVE Online, and then Dust 514 and the community and all these things they want to walk through. And anytime Dust 514 came up, just the smallest smattering of applause, like people, like you were just prying it out of this community to show any sort of interest in what was clearly a major initiative for CCP. And then they would announce, like, and in EVE Online in the new expansion, like, we've replaced the sound effects for the engine, and like, woo! Woo! Like, the whole place is standing up for, like, new sound effects for engines, but that's why we're really like, oh, and we've rehauled the entire, like, you know, the shooting engine. It's like,
I mean, the simple fact that they got away with killing that, not exactly killing that game, but basically just replacing it with something else entirely, just goes to show you how little people do actually care, because a company would not risk that if they weren't really certain that they weren't going to alienate too many of their fans.
Yeah, and it's a bad game. Like I've played it a couple of different times, and
it's just boring.
Tried to give it the benefit of the doubt, because the basic premise of, I love the stories of EVE Online. I have zero interest or time to invest in EVE Online as it stands, but being a soldier, a participant in these great stories in a shooter context, which I get, sounds awesome. And I hope it's something they can pull off in the future, even if Dust wasn't it, because I think it really would allow a lot of people to participate in a universe that they find fascinating, which is why they're interested in your book, but feel alienated by the way it plays because it's just not of interest to them.
Yeah, absolutely. And I did one time, probably about 6 to 8 months ago, I did this sort of like interview, so to speak, with the Dust 514 and EVE Online Reddits, and I just asked, like, what do you guys think of Dust 514? Just like talk to me about that and just give me your general reactions. And I asked both communities, and both communities were pretty much in agreement that Dust 514 was kind of a disappointment. And this is the people who are like reading the Dust 514 Reddit, who are saying like, yeah, I play this game all the time, but it's not what it should be. Yeah, so they missed the mark, and I'm a little bit confused as to why they're still going at that again. Like, why are they trying to do something again that didn't work out the last time? I feel like it would probably, it's this weird thing with CCP that they did this amazing thing, EVE Online, and people love it. Like even people who don't play it love it. And they have 500,000 subscribers after 11 years. Like that's incredible for an MMO. And they don't seem to plug that much money back into EVE. Like you would think that they would really devote themselves to making sure that this game is going to be around forever, going to be around for 50 years because it has that potential. But instead, they're working on World of Darkness. They're working on like diversifying their portfolio rather than doubling down on what they already have. And I think that's really frustrating for a lot of people in the EVE community.
Well, yeah, and I think they're in a weird spot as a studio because what makes EVE Online work? If you change too much of it to make it more broadly appealing, you run the very real risk of alienating the very people who have built you to the point that you're at. Mm-hmm. And they seem extremely sensitive to that, which is why they build a portfolio around EVE Online as opposed to within EVE Online, because at the end of the day, if the little experiments and even some of the grander experiments they do around EVE Online don't work out, they still have EVE Online. Whereas if they screw the pooch on EVE Online, they don't have anything to fall back on. So like World of Darkness, 7 years of tens of millions of dollars just for nothing. At least Dust 514 shipped.
Right.
Even if Dust 514 didn't work out, they can still fall back on EVE Online, and I think that's the weird position they find themselves in because the expansions for EVE are never in the direction of trying to get more people to play EVE Online. It's the weird stuff around it, like comic books, or trying to do things of that nature. Because if you tweak EVE Online too much, those people will run away or go to a different game, and they seem maybe too afraid of messing with what works. At the risk of losing.
Fair enough. Yeah. And I mean, like this expansion pack is the perfect example because this is like the major changes from what I understand in this. I haven't studied it too much because I've been so focused on the Kickstarter. But the major changes from what I understand are like changes to like logistics operations and like shipping vessels and stuff like that, which is stuff that like nobody's going to actually care about outside of the EVE universe, but it really gets them excited. They always have this like one nugget of information out there that really just that sparks imaginations in everybody outside of EVE. Like Ben Kuchera was at FanFest, my old boss Ben Kuchera, now at Polygon, and he's chatting me on Gmail, and he's like, "Oh my God, dude, did you hear what they're actually doing with EVE? There's going to be these stargates that players can build that they don't know where they go. Like, imagine being the first person to go into this Stargate and you don't even know where you're going to go. Like, that's so freaking cool." Like that, and I'm like, yeah, you know what? That's going to be the live stream event of the year when that actually happens. That's going to be a lot of fun. So, I mean, they do have this understanding of how to get people excited. They do understand like the tone and the timbre of EVE that gets people's engines revved up.
Yeah, I mean that is legitimately a really cool idea. So Alex, what are you up to this week?
Let's see. Well, today I will have a chat up on the interview dump truck with the head of Video Game Championship Wrestling, Baz McMahon.
Awesome.
Yeah, their end of season show is tomorrow night, so I got a 45-minute or so conversation with him going up. I will have the Mario Kart review for later this week when the embargo lifts on Thursday. Other than that, just kind of starting to work on E3 booking stuff.
Yeah, we're actually starting to get appointment stuff from various publishers, and I mean the challenge for you and I who are putting together a lot of the guest stuff for the night shows at E3 is that a lot of it can't happen until very, very close, which I really stresses me out.
Yes,
I would much rather have like a decent sense of what's going to happen a couple weeks out, but that's just not possible because, if some cool new project is announced the week before E3, that's the only time that the public relations department is going to acknowledge that game or that developer will be at E3, and thus that's the only time we can then say, hey, cool, can you come by on Tuesday night and talk about your game? So, like, all we can really do now is just try and cover our bases while knowing full well that all of the real work happens about 9 days before the show.
Yeah, it's just about getting the bugs in PR people's brains so that they know, constant like nagging reminder that, hey, we still need someone, just kind of let us know when you get a chance, over and over and over again until finally we get something together.
Yeah. So Alex, sorry, Andrew. What goes through the last couple weeks of the Kickstarter? Like, what do you have more things that you're announcing as you get towards the end of the stream? Even though you've already, obviously hit your mark, but now you're clearly looking into doing some more expansive things.
So I've been really quiet over the last 2 weeks, and I've been trying to be very sensitive about like not spamming my backers' inboxes with like rallying cries like let's spread this on Facebook and Twitter, because like I hit my goal and they did amazing things for me and like my life, and I don't want to give them spam to deal with. So like I've been really quiet and just trying to be like sit down and work diligently to try and come back, and finally when I do have something to say, I'll have something really amazing to say. And so what I'm working on right now is I'm hoping that by Wednesday I'll be able to announce a hardcover version. I have to have 2 really important meetings, but I'm really hoping that if those go well, I'll be able to show people, well, not be able to show people because it doesn't exist yet, but talk to people about what I want to do with like a big coffee table, beautiful thing with giant full-page versions of old EVE propaganda posters, which are just might be the most fascinating thing about the game, and it would break my heart if I wasn't able to include them in the book. These huge, like, community-made propaganda posters that I want them to be just like loud and proud, huge full-page things, and that's got me really excited. Like that's what I've been working on every single day since I hit the goal, and yeah, so that's my week is trying to figure out how to get that to make that happen.
Cool.
Yeah, I'm gonna be. I'll probably be doing Spooking with Scoops on Tuesday night. At some point this week, I'll do a quick look solo of Dread Out, which is the Indonesian-made horror game inspired by Fatal Frame that comes out. I think it comes out on Friday. So I'll record that. That'll be up later this week. But I'm excited to play that. The demo of that was spectacular in that I did not enjoy my time with it at all. In a good way. Good way. So I'll be looking at that. I've got this Tomodachi Life feature I've been kicking around that I don't know. We actually didn't even get to chatting about that. We'll see how that pans out
We'll talk on Friday.
Yeah, we can revisit that. But I've been working on a feature, and then Nintendo released a statement that sort of killed a bunch of what I was asking people about. I'm glad they responded, but it's like, oh, can you give me my 48 hours back that I spent on something like this? So we'll see if something is salvageable there. But we'll see what else comes out throughout the week. But Andrew, we super appreciate you coming on the show. We'll have to have you on again to tell us and more stories of EVE Online as they unfold.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. This has really been a lot of fun.
Cool. All right. Well, Alex, I will talk to you on Friday.
Oh.